We have here with us Neville Wakefield. He is this year in the jury of the festival. Neville, thank you for being here. And he put up these films. We are not going to see all the films from this series of Districted. We are only going to see the films by Marina Abramovich, Matthew Barney, Marco Brambilla, Larry Clark, and Sam Taylor Wood. There are two or three more, but Neville chose that we could see these today. So we will be here for a Q&A in the end of the screening, but I think we should say something about this project. How did it come up, and why did you choose these artists?
Sure. So thanks for coming. Districted was a project that we created about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in which we invited, I think, 10 or 12 artists to make films that addressed issues around sex and pornography. This was in 2008, so it was a moment at which there was a lot of conversation about pornography, in large because it was shifting from a print medium to the internet. And what we invited, the title of it's a portmanteau project. The title Districted is obviously a pun on restricted, the R rating that was then current and given to films that had content that was deemed too sexual to be available for a younger audience. There were a few sort of motivating factors behind this project. One was we felt that a film in general was there was an inequity in that you could show a eviscerated human. You could, as David Cronenberg did, you could pull a video cassette out of someone's stomach, but you couldn't show two people making love. So that was one aspect of it, and then the other one was that there was a lot of discussion about pornography at that time, and people were very unhappy with it, and yet they still consumed it. So the other criteria for this project was to make the kind of pornography that you would want to watch. The selection we're going to show now is 2 men and 2 women, 4 very different points of view. There's one by, sorry. Are we showing?
Marina?
Actually, five.
It's fine.
There's one by Marina Abramovich. I'm not quite sure which order they're going to play in, which is called Balkan Erotic Epic, where she goes back to her homeland in Serbia and explores rituals around sexuality and fertility. There's a short film by Sam Taylor Wood, who went on to make 50 Shades of Grey, which is really about the onanism and the myth of Onan and spreading his seed into the infertile ground. There's an amazing film by Matthew Barney, which was filmed in Brazil, in the Bahia, the Salvador Festival, in collaboration with Arto Lindsay, and that film really, to me, represents someone making the kind of porn that they would want to watch. There's a piece by Marco Brambilla, who also comes from a more commercial background, which is really about the overload of imagery that comes with pornography. And then finally, there's a more documentary piece by Larry Clark, which really does explore this transitional moment between how we used to learn about sex through print images to how we've come to know about it today through the internet, and the difference between those types of things. And I have to just warn you that there's some really quite graphic images in the Larry Clark film, so be warned, because it's lunchtime, and you may want to
Sex and pornography have been in the art since
the beginnings of time.
Since the beginnings of the art. So that's not true. It's kind of an updated approach to it.
It's an updated approach, but as I say, I think the reason for the update was that there was a different, around that time, around 2008, there was a different type of imagery being produced, and there was a different way of distributing it. So suddenly, and Larry Clark talks about this in his film, and I had a lot of conversations with him about it, about his understanding of sexuality coming from magazines, and then for the generation that are in his film, who are all in their late teens, early 20s. There's suddenly this sea of sexual images to draw from, and that becomes your sexual education for children now. So,
okay, enjoy the screening, and we'll be here for a Q&A in the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not only love, but also pornography have been present since ever in ours. So we can. But do you think it's more shocking seeing for the audiences? Have you experienced it? So the film went to some festivals. Have you had this experience? Is it more difficult for the audiences to see a film like this and understand it as so the artistic? I mean, more Larry Clark's film, which is more kind of a sociological treatise of the moment. A bit as Godard, he made also a film about the state of sex. So how youth faced sex in those times. This is more that, because when we see, well, it's not so shocking when we see those. So there are Hindu high reliefs and sculptures where that represent things that could be also shocking, but in the cinema is more shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly when the collection of films first started going around and it went to Cannes and to various other festivals, I think Larry Clark's is the most challenging, partly because it kind of makes public what tends to be a very private experience. I think in most of the other films, it's really what you're looking at is the artist's imagination. I mean, particularly with Matthews, it was the last one that we just saw. And so you understand it as being somewhat the other, if you want. Whereas with Larry's, what he's really taking is this sort of continent of pornography and dissecting it, and also just pushing it back at us and making us look at the realities of that kind of production, which are often messy, or exploitative, reveal the sociological as well as the aesthetic mores of the time.
And the people who participate, actors or non-actors, they are talking to the camera, but as if they were talking to us. The camera is in a position.
It's very intimate. Yeah, yeah. It was none of them were actors. Larry made a casting call, asking for both men and women, and then conducted as an interview. Interestingly, he had a completely different film in mind. There was much more about his childhood sexuality, and there was a lot of discussion that you probably picked up on about both men and women shaving and depilating themselves. And Larry's first idea for a film was actually involved going back to his childhood, and he spent a lot of time in the film was shot in Los Angeles, in the Valley, And he spent a lot of time looking for, first of all, for women with natural growth, with natural pubic growth, and he couldn't find them. So then it began. This triggered this whole investigation into how pornography has changed, also how we present our bodies, and so. You know, he was particularly struck by the fact that the men as well as the women shave, and that sex has been sort of visualized by the porn industry and made less intimate by.
Where is the frontier between one or other, or do you think art can include porno? What's the difference, for instance, between a Greek vase
art and pornography. That's the question that these films set out. I think I'm not the one to answer that. I think
but you know, there's a Spanish film I saw about 5-6 years ago, and there were these two characters. They were a boy and a girl. They were young, and they had no work, and they answered to an announcement in a newspaper, and it's like more like the same. So they sit there, and there's a guy and the camera asking, so have you ever did porno, and why did you come? And they had only came, but it's the same way.
The same idea. Yeah.
And then so they do it, and then they get paid. But it's the same process of filming as Larry Clark does here.
Yeah, and I think that in that sense, that sort of pornography is about hypervisualization, and you know, that tends to be devoid of the poetics of, or even the emotion of what we're actually experiencing.
What about Marina's film? It's very interesting because she makes a liaison between all these rights and so sex and connected to rights and ways of thinking. It's very, very interesting. But at the same, she does with, let's say, kind of a performance where she has women and men, and there's also the drawing for certain
the animation. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think she was interested in exploring the sort of sexual anthropology, sexual mythology of her own past, and some of it she was able to visualize using real people, and then some of it was harder, like the story about the fish. You know, seemed to demand an animation rather than a real footage.
And Matthew Barney's film, in which you were more involved. His idea of having the connection it's a bit like you said Cronenberg does in Crash, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think Matthew's always been interested in body horror and this idea of what constitutes a prosthesis. You know, he uses, his sculpture often uses prosthetic plastic, the white plastic that you saw on the drive shaft of the truck. That's typically used internally for inside the body for remaking joints and that kind of thing. So he's always been interested in this, in the boundaries of the body and where the body meets the environment and where, in this instance, it meets machinery. So obviously the character in the film is really attempting to have sex with this deforestation truck and become one with the machinery. So it becomes his lover.
Do you think the question of pornography in art, which was very, like you say, fashionable 10 years ago, it's still going on? Because maybe I saw a lot of post-porn festivals and post-porn films 10 years ago, or maybe now it's answered or what?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting where that debate's gone, and to be honest, I'm not really sure. I do think this moment, which we did this project, which was in the mid-2000s, was interesting precisely because what I said before, because suddenly we were saturated with readily accessible pornographic imagery, and I think it you know, certainly, and Larry's film is really about that, and about the transition through various cultures, through print culture, through VHS culture, which made things slightly more accessible, to a complete accessibility with the internet, and how that has changed not just the way that we present our own bodies and view sex, in the sense that in that film there was talk about, you know, the money shot, and that it was done for camera, and that the visualization of the act becomes more important than the act itself. And of course that's really changed, given that most children get their sex education from imagery, from pornography.
But for a child today, I think it's not very difficult to find pornography in the internet.
No, not at all. But it's changed the way they view sex. I mean, you know, I have young adult children. You know, their version of sex is very different from the one that I grew up with. The one that I grew up with was you know, some magazines and probably some art.
Yeah.
That's the way that
and it started changing in these times.
nudity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these days, so the experience is, most of the guys, sometimes they say, guys and girls, so boys and girls, they say that they use it to watch from tapes they had from their parents, but they watch it with other boys and girls. But these days it's more a more lonely experience because you do it in the internet. And I guess you are always registered, even if when we choose in the internet a private door, or what you call it, there's always some registration. If anyone who controls it wants to know, this politician use it to watch. I think that's different these days. It's not so. It's intimate in a way, but there's a record of it. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changed it radically. You know, and what's considered normal and what's considered, you know, loving has changed. I mean, obviously, one of the things that came out of Larry's film was that all these young men are obsessed with anal sex because that's what they were looking at on the internet. But you know, that was a relatively new phenomenon because that hadn't been normalized in terms of a visual language until that point. At least within the heterosexual world.
And the porn industry has also changed a lot.
Yeah.
Now there are these. So I remember about 1 year ago or something that all newspapers had interviews with this woman. I think she's based in Spain, Erica Lust, or. And she said that she was transforming the industry of porn into not those tapes from the 70s and from the 80s. Now these days, I think they are doing things more. They even have festivals, etc. And they use the logos and the awards.
Right, and I think up until roughly the point at which this was made, there was a porn industry that was trying to mimic the film industry in some ways. I mean, it was still interested in production values. It still had some degree of narrative to it as a vehicle. And then and there was a porn industry that was based in Silicon Valley that people like Jeff Burton documented, and plenty of people did work in it. You know, what happened not so long ago with the advent of something like Pornhub is that the porn industry became a site of aggregation. And no one really, there isn't really a production industry to it anymore. And interestingly enough, I was just reading the other day about, you know, everything is done as an A/B test or categorized. So, you know, if you don't fit into a certain category, you don't exist. So women, for instance, who don't fall under teen or don't fall under MILF, which is an age group between, I don't know, 23 and 35 or something, are completely excluded from this industry now, and there was a lot of writing about that.
One last question before we go. Do these films, are these films used separately? For instance, does Marina shows this film in a gallery or?
No, I mean, Marina did a lot of, but I mean, there was a lot of offshoot work from this. So a lot of these images you might have seen as stills in Marina's exhibitions, and actually, Matthew, there was a different film that was done with Arto Lindsay that came out of this. But no, these films only exist in this context.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if you don't have any further questions, thank you all. Thank you, Neville.
Thank you.